Good morning. Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Happy Wellness Wednesday. I hope you are all doing fabulous today. It is Wellness Wednesday. I'm so excited about today's Wellness Wednesday. Is something that I started. If you're just stumbling on my, I have something. Okay. If you're just stumbling on my page, my name is Donna, and Wellness Wednesday is something I started because I believe that we can all be more well if we share our stories about the things that we've done that work, and the things that we've done that don't work, because not everybody is the same and everybody has a little something different and a little bit different journey. And sharing stories helps to inspire and helps to try new things. Again, my name is Donna. I am a mom. I am a nana. I am an activewear fanatic. Check out this adorable, cute new shirt from my boutique. And I'm a wellness advocate, studying to be a personal trainer, runner, yogi. That's what I'm going to do when I get done here is do some yoga because my legs are very angry with me right now. And I'm excited to talk about nutrition labels today. A lot of times with Wellness Wednesday, good morning, Miss Carla. A lot of times with Wellness Wednesday, we end up digging into mindset and talking about things that relate to anxiety and depression. But every once in a while that gets a little intense. We got to take a break, work on some body things, work on some food things. So that's what we're going to do today. If you're here, let me know you're here. Say good morning. Sometimes Facebook shows me the things, sometimes they don't. So if you ask a question or you say something, good morning, Danielle, and I don't respond, it's probably because I didn't see it. So sometimes it shows me things, sometimes it doesn't. Every day's a different day, just like everything else. So here's what happened. Last week, we talked about how to get your body moving without it knowing what you're doing, how to get your body moving without working out, the scary words of exercise and working out. And then I was doing some personal trainer study. Check out this awesome textbook, and got into the nutrition section, which I love nutrition. Love learning more. And I actually learned some things that I didn't already know. So I thought, oh, you know what? Maybe I need to share this with some other people. So it seemed like a great thing to talk about today. I don't know that I'll have to look at the textbook a whole lot because I do have my notes. So if you see me looking down, looking around, you know that's what it is. All right, so let's get started because there are some nutrition label basics here you might not be aware of because I know I wasn't. But things, again, just like Facebook, are changing on the daily, and it's good to keep up with some of these things. So a little bit about nutrition label history and laws, because these were definitely things I didn't know, and I found them very interesting. Nutrition labels weren't included on packaged food until the 1970s. Now, for some of us that were born around then, that may seem like a long time ago, but it really wasn't when you stop to consider just food and history and all of that. So 1970s, in fact, in 1972 was when the FDA began to require labels for anything that added added nutrients or made nutritional claims. In 1984, the National Cancer Institute and Kellogg's launched a food labeling campaign regarding high fiber and its alleged relationship to reduced cancer risk. And this led to a frenzy of nutrition and health claims, which of course, not all of which were founded, not all of which were vetted by the FDA. So what happened was the FDA had to start mandating labels. Hello, Jack. Good morning. And more specifically in 1993 was when they started with the current style of nutrition label that we are familiar with today. And they started to mandate that trans fats be listed on those labels by 2003. So we're getting a little bit closer in history pretty quickly here. In 2022, mandatory labeling now has to report as of 2022. And some of us are just finding out about this because I know I've been all of a sudden seeing posts about this everywhere on Facebook, so it kind of fit in. It's just been in the last year that FDA has required mandatory labeling to report if a food is bioengineered or derived from bioengineered ingredients. So everybody has been really surprised to all of a sudden find this on our labels. But the fact is that this started back in January of 2022. We'll talk about that for just a minute. Bioengineered foods are something that could be a whole other can of worms. That's really not in the wheelhouse of Wellness Wednesday. So this will just be very general stuff today. The law also requires, and I did not know this either, that serving sizes are based on average consumption. So in the nutrition world, in the clean eating world, anybody that's been on any kind of a diet plan, food plan, anything like that has always relied on those serving sizes, but those serving sizes are based on average consumption, not the actual recommended serving. So that was a big surprise to me. For example, ice cream used to be a half cup recommended serving, and it is now a 2/3 cup recommended serving, and that's based on average consumption. Which I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that there's no time that I've ever sat down to a bowl of ice cream where it's only been 2/3 of a cup. So I'm not even sure that I'm not even convinced that that's accurate. Another thing in the nutritional label history and laws is that health claims, no matter what they are, they have to include a qualifying statement that the evidence supporting the claim is limited. Doesn't matter what it is. And that's the same with structure or functional claims, which usually relates to supplements. And this I found very interesting. The the statement that has to be included is that the FDA has not evaluated the claim and the supplement is not intended to treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So even down to, for example, calcium builds strong bones, which is something that's kind of just been a known thing for decades. That still has to have a disclaimer that the FDA has not evaluated the claim and the supplement is not intended to treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So these two claims specifically definitely got my attention because it doesn't matter what it is, and it doesn't seem to matter what extensive amount of research has been done on it. If it's a health claim that the food is making, it has to say that the evidence supporting the claim is limited. It doesn't matter what it is. You could have 18,000 studies that say that, yes, this claim is legit, but the FDA still requires it to say that the evidence supporting the claim is limited. Based on my studies when I was doing my bachelor's degree and my comparison of studies done in the United States versus studies done in foreign countries, I actually stumbled on a lot of that then, that USA studies and foreign studies, often even if they said the same thing, their ultimate results and analysis were just a little bit different because the US studies always said there was not enough evidence, where that was not always the case in foreign studies. Good morning, Bob. Nice to see you. The structure function claims, like I said, usually relate to supplements, and there's actually a lot of research on a lot of different supplements, but you will always find that it states that the FDA has not evaluated it and that the supplement is not intended to cure, treat, or prevent any disease. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at labels. Even simple things like front of package labeling is what they call when on the front of the package it says, heart healthy or, may reduce cancer, things like that. Those front of package labelings are not as regulated by the FDA. And just because it says that on the label somewhere, especially on the front, it may be a reason you pick it up and investigate it further, but don't make it be the reason. And I have a great example of this in just a minute here. Don't make it be the reason that you put it in your cart. So top things to note about labels. All amounts are listed for one serving, and some items will list both that and amounts for full consumption. Now, we're seeing a lot of labels still only list for one serving, but I know that I'm seeing in the grocery store more and more where lots of things have what the nutrition is for one serving and what the nutrition is if you consume the whole package. So here's an example. This is a chunky soup can. This is from our hurricane stock. We probably need to eat it before it goes bad. This here is an example of the front of package labeling I was talking about. The Healthy Request Heart Healthy. That is not necessarily regulated by the FDA. That is something that this particular brand is using to convey that it's heart healthy because it's lower in sodium, or because it's missing certain ingredients. Now, I did not bring my glasses with me, so this could be fun. But this is an example of what I was talking about. So here is the one serving nutrients, and then over here is the whole package nutrients. Now, I don't know about you, but on the rare occasion that I eat a can of soup, it's usually my whole meal, and I usually eat the whole can. So I need to make sure I'm paying attention to this list of nutrients, not this one over here, because this one is for a 1 cup serving, and this other one is for the whole can. Now, the interesting thing about this one, and again, I'm not going to get on bioengineered foods, is this can was purchased last year in preparation or at some point during hurricane season as we started slowly collecting things to make sure we were well stocked. And this particular can does say on it, and I never noticed it before, it says that it contains bioengineered food ingredients. The ingredients from corn in this product come from genetically modified crops. I'm not going to get into, I try to avoid politics and negativity, so I'm not going to get into, and I don't know enough to speak on anything about bioengineered foods. But I know that this is a big thing for a lot of people all of a sudden, that that they're trying to avoid things that have bioengineered foods in the bioengineered anything in the food. Sorry, can't make words this morning. So it's important to pay attention because a lot of our foods are now coming with this label. And if there are things that you buy on the regular that you're like, oh, I don't need to read the label, you might want to start doing that because labels change constantly and what the FDA requires changes constantly. So even if it's something you buy all the time, it's a good idea to put your eyeballs on the label once in a while, like I was not doing. I was purchasing this because it was lower in sodium than other soups. And that was the primary reason. And also, again, front of package labeling, 15 grams of protein per can, which is normally what I eat is the whole can if I do soup. So I can look at that and see that, yes, that's still what's reported for the entire consumption. And it's only half of that if you do the 1 cup serving, not quite half. So I'm usually looking at protein, low sodium, things like that. Sometimes I'm looking at organic, but not all the time. So these are things to keep in mind, is that your label is either going to have a single serving or it's going to have the whole package consumption or it's going to have both, and that there are new things appearing on the label all the time. So even if it's something, like I said, that you are consuming all of the time, buying all of the time, it doesn't hurt to put your eyeballs, continue putting your eyeballs on the label to make sure that you're still getting what you think you're getting. Another example of that is a protein bar that I used to consume regularly. Loved it. Calories didn't matter in that case. It was very high quality protein. But I am personally allergic to stevia. Stevia is not listed as a known allergen, but for those that don't know, and it's a fantastic sweetener, but for those that don't know, it is from the same plant family as ragweed. So if you are allergic to the ragweed family, there is a chance, it's not guaranteed, that you may be allergic to things that have stevia in them. Or there's a couple different strains of stevia. There is one strain that bothers me and one strain that doesn't. Well, this particular protein bar changed their formula, and I didn't know because I wasn't reading the label, because it had always done me right. So I was continuing to buy it and never read the label. So they changed their formula and they added stevia. And the next thing you know, good morning, Karen. The next thing you know, I am blowing up like the Michelin Man in serious stomach distress because of my food allergy to stevia. So again, I can't stress enough the importance of whatever it is that you're looking for in the label. If you're a label reader at all, don't just assume that because you've been buying something for 10, 15 years, that it's still the same product that you were getting. Make sure you are putting your eyeballs on those labels as much as possible. I am that person. If you find me in the grocery store, I'm probably standing in the grocery store, hugged up against the shelf reading something when I remember to take my glasses. So the other thing to remember on these types of labels is that these are based on 2,000 calorie diets. Not everybody's on a 2,000 calorie diet. So if the label says that this is I'm pulling numbers out of my ear here. If the label says that this is 20% of your fat intake for the day, that's based on 2,000 calories. So if you're on a 2,000, yes, if you're on a 1,500 calorie meal plan per day, then that's going to take up a lot more than 20% of your fat allotment in that daily plan. Say if you're on a 2,500 calorie diet a day, it's going to be less than 20%. So keep that in mind when you're looking in that at the labels. If you're paying attention to anything that it's based on, if you're paying attention to those percentages, then you want to keep in mind that most of these are based on a 2,000 calorie diet. Ingredient lists. Ingredient lists are really important, especially if you're looking to eat a little cleaner and get away from processed foods. And actually labels started because of the processed foods that were entering the market in the 1970s. But most things, unless they're a whole food, have a nutrition label on them now. What does that mean? It means if they're not in the produce section or they're not a meat where the nutrition label or the ingredients is what that item is, an apple is an apple, that's the ingredients, it's an apple, then there's not going to be there's going to be a nutrition label on it unless what's in it is the sole ingredient of what's there. So partially hydrogenated oils are also a major source of trans fat, which is no longer considered safe and no longer added to foods. So, but there's something you can still look at in the ingredients to let you know that it's there. But for the most part, it's not considered safe by the FDA anymore. A lot of people still talk about partially hydrogenated oils, but you should not be finding them in most of your labels, but it is still something to be looking for. On your ingredient lists, do you remember when our moms told us that, I don't know about you, but I remember my mom and other adults around me telling me that the first ingredient on the list was the highest content in the food. And I don't think I really believed that at the time, but that is actually kind of the truth. Your ingredient list is in decreasing order of the substance weight or the most abundant item in the product. So whatever's first in your ingredient list is what's most abundant in that product. So if the first thing on the list is sugar, guess what? Most of what's in that product is sugar. In this case, at Smucker's, I eat a lot of natural creamy peanut butter. I love it. I even have a little hack. If you don't like the way it separates and starting a new jar can be difficult, just turn it upside down for an hour or two before you are ready to dig into it. And that helps with the mixing process. I promise. I've been doing it for a long time. So here's the nutrition label on the Smucker's jar. Now, this is based on 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, which is the serving for peanut butter. It's not based on consumption of the whole package, probably because they don't assume that most people are going to consume the whole package in one sitting. I'm not sure I could either, as much as I love it. But this is the natural peanut butter. And I go for the natural, not because it says natural on the front, but because of the ingredient list, which says it contains peanuts and 1% or less of salt. That's it. That's the whole ingredient list. Peanuts and 1% less, or 1% or less of the daily recommended value of salt, which we'll talk about that in a second too. So guess what's in there? Peanuts. On the soup, the ingredient list, I can't read. The first ingredient is water. So guess what the most abundant thing in the soup is water. So what does this have to do with when you're looking at the label? Well, whole grains are a big thing and everybody's trying to get for the whole grains. And FDA actually does have some recommendations on whole grains. And to be considered a whole grain, it has to contain all the essential parts of the original kernel. Refined grains are listed as enriched. So if the first ingredient on your bread, for example, is enriched whole wheat, it is not going to be a whole grain product because the most abundant thing in there is an enriched item. So that's where knowing the labels and reading and what we were told when, years and years and years ago, that the first ingredient is what it's most made of is absolutely true, and it still stands today. So whole grains, a lot of people are looking for whole grains versus enriched things. And that's important to know. And I meant to check my bread yesterday because I eat a brand of bread that's got all the seeds and sprouts and all that. So now that I know that, which I didn't know before, that for it to be considered a whole grain, it has to contain all the essential parts of the original kernel. And that if it starts with enriched, it's probably not really a whole grain food. Or if the ingredients of the flour start with enriched, there's not going to be whole grains. I'm going to be going back and checking some of the things that I was purchasing because I thought they were whole grain, because either of that front of the package labeling or because I didn't necessarily understand at the time everything I was reading in the label. So again, if the first ingredient is enriched grain, not a whole grain product, it's probably not whole grain. And another checking point is fiber. If it says it's a whole grain product, but there's no fiber, then that probably means it's not really a whole grain product. No fiber means not whole grain. Now, with that said, fiber can be added back in, but for the most part, if it's got some fiber in it, then it is probably a whole grain product. Also, high in fiber is only required to be 5 grams. It has to be 5 grams or over to be considered high in fiber. So keep that in mind too. Okay. Another important thing that I didn't know, especially with stuff that's marketed for kids, there's a lot of fortified with vitamin B, vitamin C. And I've never really understood what that meant. So little bit of lingo for you. Fortified means the nutrient that isn't normally there has been added. So if it's fortified, it means things have been added to it that are not normally occurring in that product. And if it's enriched, it means normal nutrients that have been lost in processing have been added back in. So that's where we go back to that fiber discussion where I just kind of lost it for a minute. If it's enriched, they can add the fiber back in if the fiber was something that's normally in the product, but it was lost in processing, then they're adding synthetic fiber back in. So keep that in mind. Fortified means that it isn't normally there and it's been added, and enriched means it is a normal nutrient that's been lost in processing and has been added back in. So those are kind of important things that I never understood when I first started reading labels, like back in 2005. So I know that's a lot of strange information, but these are things that are really on people's minds right now, that we're still talking about the hydrogenated oils. Maybe not everybody realizes that they're no longer recognized as safe. A lot of people are talking about whole grains versus enriched items. Not everybody wants those enriched and fortified items. They want stuff that's got those nutrients naturally occurring in it, not added back in or added to it to begin with. And the definitions of fortified versus enriched and basic stuff about the bioengineering on the labels. So those are kind of the things I wanted to cover today. There's 6 things that may not mean to you on labels what you think they do. This comes from a Women's Health article. And if you're interested in reading that article, I'm happy to send you the link, drop a comment. So 6 key words that you may see on the front of the package labeling that don't necessarily mean what they think you do. And I'll try to go through these quick because I know everybody's limited on time. So here we go. Made with does not mean it's a good source of. It means it contains at least a little bit. So I don't have an example right off the top of my head, but I found that pretty interesting. Maybe made with real milk. I don't know if that's a thing still, because I pretty much don't buy a whole lot of dairy products. Or made with organic ingredients. There's very little, if any, regulation on organics. So you have, as much as I like the idea of organic things, and I know that there are certain organic things that sit in my body and sit in my stomach better, be very cautious with those labels because there's not really any regulation to speak of on organics. So made with doesn't mean it's a good source of. It means that it contains at least a little bit. Natural does not mean that it's not processed. It means that it probably doesn't contain added colors, artificial flavors, or synthetic substances. You still want to read the label. Just because it says natural on the front, like with the peanut butter, doesn't mean it's not worth reading the label. I have looked at natural peanut butter labels that still have added sugar. So natural might make you reach and pick the item up, but don't let it be the reason you put it in your cart. Make sure you're checking the label first, because it doesn't mean that it's not processed. It just means that it probably doesn't contain certain ingredients, which are also important. A lot of us are trying to avoid any kind of artificial additives like colors or flavors or synthetic substances. So absolutely natural is a reason to pick it up, but make sure you're still putting your eyeballs on the label. Number 3 on that list was lightly sweetened. Lightly sweetened doesn't actually mean very little sugar. That's what we assume when we look at it, but we assume that it has very little sugar. It could still have actually tons of sugar, or artificial sweeteners. The FDA does not regulate this label. So anything ending in an ose is a dead giveaway that it contains sugars and sweeteners. And as you know, artificial sweeteners can sometimes be as bad, if not worse, than added sugar. A lot of those ose ending things are actually natural occurrences of natural real sugar. But just because it says lightly sweetened does not mean it's got less sugar than anything else on the shelf. Low, light, and reduced. There used to be a meme that went around on social media that said if it says low, light, or reduced, or fat-free, it probably means chemical crap storm. But we won't get into that right now. Low, light, or reduced, you think it has few calories, grams of fat, lower sodium, or whatever else the label lists on the front of package labeling. What it really means is that it has less of that stuff than the original version. The FDA states that foods that are labeled light can be labeled light if they contain half the fat or 1/3 of the calories of the original version. Meanwhile, manufacturers are also allowed to say that products are reduced sodium if they have 25% less than the original or other similar foods. Keep in mind that when companies remove fat and salt from foods, they sometimes beef up other additives and sugar to keep them tasting yummy and tasting like the original. So before you buy, compare the ingredients. I do that a lot. I find that I'm always reading the labels for any kind of cream cheese that I buy. If I buy the whipped or the light or the new Fadel cheese or whatever it is, if I'm buying cream cheese, I'm always comparing labels. I'm comparing store brand with name brand. Sometimes the store brand, believe it or not, has less sodium. And I'm looking for things like that for that reason. It's always a good idea if you're buying a light or low sodium product to try to compare to its original to see what the differences really are, because they may be sticking things in the light or low sodium or fat-free product that isn't in the original. And sometimes you're just better off with the original. That's usually the case for me with sour cream. Free. This is another thing. Free makes you think that it doesn't contain any of the yucky ingredients, any of that fat, the sugar, the whatever. But in the food labeling word, free actually means very little. Remember how we said that if it's lightly sweetened or if it's low, light, or reduced, we assume that it carries very little? That's actually the definition of free in the food labeling world. So if it says free, we think it doesn't contain any of those ingredients, when in fact, free means very little. If it's got 5 calories only, if it's got 0.5 grams of fat or less, 5 milligrams of sodium or less, or 0.5 grams of sugar per serving, then it's considered fat-free, sugar-free, any of those things. So again, this is the same situation where side-by-side comparison to see what else might be in there that's making it taste fantastic, even if it doesn't have as much or any of those items, is worthwhile. And then finally, we touched on this a little bit, high in fiber. You think, oh great, it's got a lot of natural fiber. For a food to be labeled high in fiber, it must provide 5 grams of fiber or more per serving. Now, for people that don't get a lot of fiber in their diets, that 5 grams can be a deal breaker for them. But it can also absolutely be an additive. We talked about that synthetic fiber enriched that's added back in after the processing. So Again, whole grain foods on the label. And actually, this Women's Health article says that if whole grains are one of the first three sources, then that means chances are, not guaranteed, but chances are the fiber in the product is natural. So those are some basics about food labels. Now, if you're worried about what's in your food and you're starting to get to that point where you think that you need to start reading labels and you're just not sure, this will be a little bit of a help for you. I obviously can't send you my textbook link, but there are some links that they refer to and some references that they refer to in there that I can hook you up with. Send me a message, drop a comment. Important things to remember. Whole foods don't require a nutrition label. If you're trying to clean up the foods you eat and eat better, you can, the old adage of sticking to the outside of the grocery store or starting with the outside of the grocery store still applies. That's usually where you find your meats, your produce, things like that. Try to buy foods that don't require a nutrition label because the ingredient is that food. Your meats, usually unless they're seasoned or marinated or something like that, the ingredient is the food. Bacon, bacon usually the uncured has less stuff in it. Less is more. Number two thing to remember, less is more. The smaller the list of ingredients in your package, probably the better. Which leads me to number three, which is if you can't pronounce the ingredient that's in your package, you probably don't want to be eating it. But at least take the time. If you're starting to make slow changes in your diet and the way you eat, take the time to start researching those things. If you look in your pantry, if there's something you buy on the regular and there's, maybe you're looking at it and you're like, oh, there's only 6 ingredients in this, but what is this? Look it up, check it out, find out what it is. Some of those are fillers. Some of them are preservatives. Some are chemical preservatives. Some are natural preservatives. There's a lot of different words for a lot of different things out there. So when you get the chance, definitely check out the ingredients that you're not sure about if you can't pronounce it. As we talked about already, sugar substitutes can be far worse for you than real sugar resources or real sugar sources. So make sure that you know what you're eating. And good morning, Dawn, and whether or not that's a sugar substitute, a natural form of sugar, an added sugar, etc. Some things there is natural sugar occurring. I'm not going to get into all the different schools of thought about natural sugar versus added sugar and how they're processed. But definitely sugar substitutes can sometimes be worse. So make sure you know what you're actually getting, especially if the item says reduced sugar or sugar-free. And then know also that food produced by very small food manufacturers, and this is directly from the FDA labeling information, food produced by very small food manufacturers, food served in restaurants, food trucks, trains, airplanes, delicatessens, and in similar establishments will not be required to bear bioengineered food labels, even if the product has bioengineered ingredients. And there's still a lot of questions just based on my brief research on this as to what level of bioengineered food ingredients there has to be in order for them to be required to label it to begin with. So the bioengineered food label, it's a very new thing. Again, just started in January of last year. Probably bears a lot more research, and due to the volatility of that discussion, maybe not something not something I will cover on a future Wellness Wednesday, depending on the reliability of the sources that I can find when it comes to bioengineered foods. But again, just know that if it's from a small manufacturer, a restaurant, a food truck, if you're getting it on a train, an airplane, in a deli, similar establishments like that, they're not required to meet that bioengineered product labeling. So I hope you found that helpful. If you did, please share. I know it was a lot of word soup and a lot of information, but there was so many things in there as long as I've been reading labels that even I didn't know that I couldn't help but share. And maybe this will just get you started kind of looking and paying attention. Again, outside of the store frequently is where some of your best foods are found. Your don't need a label foods. So if you are trying to clean up your diet, try to go for the whole foods more. Check your list of ingredients. Less is definitely more. There are still healthy foods in the middle of the grocery aisle. Sometimes people forget about things like dried beans and peas that can be used for lots of different things that are very, very clean, very, very whole foods. They're usually buried in the middle in the pasta aisle. So it's not just the outside of the store. I know that there are some people, especially personal trainers, that actually do grocery store tours with their clients. I don't know if anything like that is happening here. If I hear of it, I will definitely let you know. Once I finish my personal trainer certification, that may actually be something I would consider doing, is a grocery store tour where I would take a handful of people and we would walk through the store and check out the labels and talk about the ingredients and which are better choices. But not ready for that just yet. So just keep that in mind. The biggest key things are less is more. If you're using something that's reduced fat, reduced sugar, fat-free, compare the label to the original to see what the differences are, because sometimes other things are being added to offset that. And watch your labels. Remember, your label may show a serving size and also the consumption of the whole package. Make sure you know which one you're doing. And remember that these are average consumed servings, not FDA recommended servings. That was probably the biggest surprise for me in the information that I just shared. So I hope you found it helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. If you found it helpful, please share. And I'll go ahead and drop this Women's Health article where I talked about these 6 things that we think when we that don't mean what we think they do. I'll go ahead and drop that in the comments for you. And if you have any questions about some of the other stuff that I talked about from my textbook, send me a message and I'll work on those links directly from those cited resources for you. And also, I thought I saved it and I can't put my hands on it, but from the information from the FDA bioengineering labels website, I'm going to put my fingers on that too. If you all want that, send me a message. So I hope you found this helpful. Maybe not always the most exciting information, but still very relevant to your wellness. And I will see you next Wednesday at 7:15. Have a fabulous day.